It all began on a gloomy autumn afternoon when the wind carried a warning that few could decipher and even fewer dare to heed. I remember how the leaves danced erratically along the dusty country road, their rustling whispers foretelling secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world. There was a lake in the depths of a forgotten wood, a lake whose dark, glassy surface concealed mysteries that had long ago been swallowed by time and regret. No one in the nearby village dared speak of it openly, yet the rumor of its cursed beauty and the unspoken tragedies attached to it kept people away. They said that if you dared to cross its threshold, you might not return, and should you vanish into its depths, your sins would be laid bare for all eternity. I tell you this now, as though recounting a fable spun from the threads of nightmares and truth. A truth that led one man, desperate and determined, to confront the ghostly legends of that very lake. His name was Edward Ashby, a man burdened by the heavy chains of lost love, betrayal, and inner demons. Edward was once a proud soul, a man known for his gentle manner and steadfast determination. However, life had stripped him of his illusions about trust and loyalty. His wife, Miranda, whom he had adored with every fiber of his being, had betrayed him in ways that cut deeper than any mortal wound. The seeds of treachery had been sown long before Edward ever noticed the cold glances and furtive whispers behind his back, and by the time he realized the extent of her infidelity, the damage was irrevocable. The echoes of her betrayal resonated in his heart, transforming it into a dark abyss where hope had no dwelling. As the seasons changed, so too did Edward's inner world. Despair had taken root and flourished within him, leaving him a shell of the man he once was. One bleak evening, with the full moon looming like a spectral overseer in the starless sky, Edward packed a small bag and set out with an almost otherworldly resolve. The destination was the infamous lake, a place that many had deemed cursed, yet to Edward it represented the last vestige of redemption and revenge. With every step into the dense, foreboding forest, the chill of the night grew sharper. Branches creaked underfoot like ancient warnings, and the wind carried murmurs that were as much a part of the forest as the trees themselves. The journey was both physical and spiritual, a pilgrimage into the heart of darkness where one confronts not only the mysteries of nature, but also the labyrinth of one's own soul. Edward's thoughts churned with memories of love turned sour, moments of tenderness now twisted by betrayal. He recalled the long nights spent waiting for Miranda's return, the whispered promises of forever that soon decayed into hollow echoes. In his mind, the lake shimmered like a spectral mirror reflecting all his pain and longing, a mirror that might, in its depths, offer him the final answer he craved. When Edward finally reached the lake, he found it to be both mesmerizing and foreboding. The water was as still as polished obsidian, its surface reflecting the warped shapes of surrounding trees, as if the forest itself were trying to mimic the unknown beyond the glassy facade. An unnatural silence permeated the air, a silence that spoke of secrets kept and horrors unseen. He remembered the village tales of souls lost in the lake's embrace, of men who went there seeking to drown their sorrows, and instead found themselves caught in an eternal dance with the shadows. Yet, there was something else that beckoned him, something deeper than mere despair, a hunger for truth and a thirst for revenge that had been smoldering inside him for years. Steeling himself, Edward stepped forward. Each stride brought him closer to the water's edge, with a boundary between the known and the unknown blurred into nothingness. His heart pounded with both fear and anticipation, echoing the rhythm of the universe in its relentless march toward destiny. There, at the water's edge, he discovered symbols etched into the stone, symbols that seemed to pulse with an unearthly energy. They were ancient, mysterious markings, hinting at a legacy older than man, perhaps even older than time itself. These signs, so intricately carved, suggested that the lake was not a mere body of water, but a gateway to forces beyond mortal comprehension. Without warning, the lake's surface rippled as if stirred by invisible hands. Edward, transfixed by the sudden movement, hesitated. A deep, resonant sound emerged from the water, a low, mournful tone that seemed to speak in a language forgotten by the ages. The sound wrapped itself around him, filling his mind with fragmented images, fleeting glimpses of laughter, whispers of promises, and a distant murmur of a woman's voice, Miranda's voice, though altered by time and treachery. His thoughts spiraled as he struggled to discern whether the voices were his memories or something far more sinister, a spectral echo of fate intertwined with his own downfall. For a moment, he saw Miranda standing at the edge of the lake, her silhouette illuminated by a ghostly glow. But it was not the woman he once knew. In her eyes burned a fire of malice and regret, as if she had been possessed by the very forces that ruled the lake's depths. Her presence, surreal and distorted, carried with it an aura of inescapable doom. It was as if the lake had become an accomplice to her betrayal, a silent witness to the unraveling of their lives. The image of her ignited a maelstrom of emotions within Edward: pain, anger, sorrow, and a desperate yearning for retribution. Compelled by a force beyond reason, Edward waded into the water. The chill of the lake embraced him like an old friend, its cold fingers wrapping around his legs and drawing him slowly forward. Each step was a battle against instinct, against the primal urge to flee. But Edward pressed on, determined to reach the heart of the mystery that had ensnared him. The water grew deeper, and with every inch he ventured, the line between reality and nightmare began to blur. Shadows danced beneath the surface, and fleeting figures emerged only to dissolve into the watery gloom. It was as though the lake itself was alive, a sentient entity with a hunger for souls and a penchant for secrets. As Edward descended deeper into the lake, his mind was awash with vivid recollections of his former life, days when love had been pure and laughter had filled the air. Yet those memories were now tainted by betrayal, as if every precious moment had been stained by the deceit that had ultimately driven him to this abyss. The water seemed to whisper his name, coaxing him forward into the depths of its enigma. In that silent, haunting space, Edward began to perceive shapes and forms that defied explanation. Ghostly apparitions, half-formed images of faces contorted by sorrow and longing, and dark figures whose eyes gleamed with an intelligence both ancient and malevolent. He wondered if these were the souls of those who had come before him, victims of the lake's insidious lure, or if they were echoes of his own fractured psyche. The further he went, the more the environment shifted. The water, once clear and reflective, grew murky and oppressive. It was as though the lake was shedding its innocent facade to reveal a deeper, more sinister layer. A realm where time had no meaning and every moment was imbued with the weight of countless tragedies. Edward felt a growing pressure around him, a force that pressed upon his chest and clouded his vision. Panic began to seep into his heart, but with it came a steely resolve. He had come this far, and turning back was no longer an option. In the midst of the dark, crushing depths, Edward's thoughts became a battle between terror and defiance. In the haze of his internal struggle, the memory of Miranda loomed large. He recalled how her smile had once lit up even the darkest days, only to become a mask that hid her true intentions. The betrayal had not come in a single moment, but had been a slow, deliberate erosion of trust, a series of small, cruel acts that compounded until nothing pure remained. There were nights when he would awaken from troubled dreams, haunted by the sound of her laughter, a sound that now seemed to mock him in the silence of his despair. In those dreams, she appeared as both his savior and his executioner, a paradox that he could neither resolve nor escape. The thought that his wife had somehow orchestrated this journey, or that her dark influence had been the catalyst for his plunge into the unknown, haunted him relentlessly. As Edward pushed further into the lake's depths, he felt as though he were entering a different dimension altogether, a place where the physical world gave way to the ethereal. The water around him began to glow faintly, emitting an eerie luminescence that cast ghostly shadows upon the ancient stones beneath. The pressure in his chest lessened for a moment, replaced by an overwhelming sense of inevitability. He understood, in a way that transcended logic, that this was the point of no return, a threshold between the realm of the living and a world governed by arcane forces. The mysterious symbols he had seen earlier now glowed with an unearthly light, and Edward realized that they were not mere carvings, but part of an ancient incantation, a ritual designed to bridge the gap between mortal existence and the mysteries that lay beyond. It was in this surreal twilight that the truth began to reveal itself in fragmented visions. Edward saw fleeting images of a time long past, where the lake was a revered site of ancient ceremonies and sacred rites. Priests and priestesses, adorned in ceremonial garb, chanted incantations by the water's edge, their voices merging with the murmurs of the wind. There was a ritualistic beauty in the way they celebrated the lake, a beauty that was steeped in reverence for the forces they believed dwelled within its depths. Yet, hidden beneath that beauty was a darkness, a promise of sacrifice, of lives given over to an enigmatic power that demanded loyalty and obedience. It was in these visions that Edward began to understand that the lake was more than a cursed body of water. It was a living monument to the eternal struggle between light and darkness, between truth and deception. The spectral figures that had haunted him now took on a clarity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. One figure, in particular, emerged from the depths, a gaunt, sorrowful visage with eyes that seemed to hold the collective grief of centuries. It reached out to him with trembling fingers, as if imploring him to remember the forgotten histories of the land. In that silent communion, Edward felt his own identity begin to merge with something far greater and infinitely older than himself. The boundaries of his mind expanded, and with them came an understanding that his journey was not solely about the betrayal he had suffered at the hands of Miranda, but about something far more profound, a reckoning with the forces that governed fate and the very nature of existence. In that moment of epiphany, the lake itself roared with a cacophony of sounds that defied description, a chorus of voices, both anguished and triumphant, echoing through the abyss. Edward was suspended between two worlds, one where his past and the weight of his loss bound him in despair, and another where the promise of dark redemption beckoned him with open, spectral arms. The realization that his fate was intertwined with the lake's eternal secret sent shivers through his entire being. Every memory of betrayal, every tear shed in solitude, and every whispered word of Miranda's deceit merged into a single, overwhelming tide of emotion. But then, as if summoned by the climax of his inner turmoil, a presence emerged from the shadows, a presence that was both familiar and abhorrent. It was Miranda herself, or at least an apparition of her. Her form was distorted and blurred, as though seen through a veil of tears and broken dreams. She reached out to him with an expression that conveyed both longing and cruelty, her eyes gleaming with an inscrutable mixture of remorse and malevolence. In that heart-stopping instant, Edward was overwhelmed by the horrifying possibility that the betrayal he had suffered was not solely her doing, but perhaps orchestrated by forces beyond her control. Had Miranda been a pawn in a far grander scheme, a scheme spun by the ancient powers that resided within the lake? Or was her betrayal the spark that ignited this chain of events, propelling both of them into an inescapable dance with destiny? Edward's heart pounded so fiercely he could almost hear it competing with the otherworldly chorus surrounding him. He tried to speak, to demand answers, but his voice was swallowed by the relentless murmur of the lake song. The apparition of Miranda moved closer, her every gesture a silent testimony to a life steeped in secrets and regret. Her eyes, once filled with tender warmth, now shone with a cold determination that chilled him to the very core. It was as if she carried within her the burden of all the choices that had led them both to this fateful moment. In that spectral embrace, time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into eternities as the lake revealed its unfathomable truths through whispers, symbols, and visions that danced at the periphery of understanding. A slow, inexorable pull began to draw Edward deeper into the heart of the lake, as though the very water was claiming him for its own. In his final moments of lucidity, he understood that his journey had always been about more than personal revenge or sorrow. It was about reconciling the shattered pieces of his past with the inexorable march of destiny, a destiny intertwined with the lake's ancient power and the enigmatic figure of Miranda. The realization was bittersweet. To know the full measure of the lake's secret was to accept that some questions must remain unanswered, that some mysteries are eternal. With one last, lingering glance at the spectral figure of his once-beloved wife, a figure that embodied both his deepest betrayal and his most fervent hope, Edward surrendered himself to the dark embrace of the lake. In that final moment, as the cold water enveloped him completely, the boundary between life and death, love and betrayal, reality and nightmare, vanished into the mist. The lake swallowed him whole, leaving behind only ripples that spread outwards in silent testimony to a life undone. And so, the legend of the cursed lake grew, whispered from one trembling voice to the next, a story of a man who sought to reclaim his shattered soul and a cheater whose actions ignited a chain of events beyond mortal reckoning. It is said that on moonless nights, if you stand at the lake's edge, you might still hear the echoes of Edward's final plea, mingling with Miranda's regretful sighs and the unending lament of the waters. A haunting reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, and that the price of betrayal is measured in souls lost to the depths of an ancient, insatiable mystery. Yet even as the years passed, and the villagers dared not speak the name of the lake aloud, there lingered an undeniable energy, a palpable tension in the air that served as a constant reminder of the fateful night when love, betrayal, and destiny converged in a symphony of sorrow and dark wonder. Those who ventured too close often reported eerie sensations, a lingering chill despite the summer heat, reflections that did not match the present, and the unmistakable sound of a distant, mournful heartbeat. Some said it was the pulse of the earth itself, mourning the endless cycle of betrayal and redemption. Others whispered that it was the echo of Edward's final moments, trapped in a cycle of eternal retribution. Over time, the legend of the lake became a parable, a cautionary tale warning against the perils of unbridled passion and the inexorable pull of forces that lie hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. And so, dear listener, as you absorb this tale of mystery and tragedy, remember that within the depths of every human heart lie secrets and regrets as deep and unfathomable as the cursed lake itself. The story of Edward Ashby and Miranda, though shrouded in darkness and unanswered questions, invites you to peer beyond the veil of the mundane and consider the possibility that every betrayal, every loss, carries with it the weight of ancient forces, a reminder that some journeys lead not to redemption, but to a destiny written in the silent, relentless language of the ages. The lake remains, a spectral sentinel of untold stories, where the souls of the lost and the broken continue to whisper their secrets into the night. Its waters, both beautiful and deadly, serve as a mirror to the human condition, fragile, transient, and ultimately enshrouded in mystery. And if you ever find yourself drawn to that enigmatic expanse, take heed, for the lake listens and it never forgets.